Today, we'll be exploring the valuation of income properties, focusing on how appraisal processes intersect with the market for capital. We'll delve into how income, risk, and capital markets collectively influence property values. Understanding these relationships is crucial for making informed investment decisions and accurately assessing property worth in the context of market dynamics. Let's dive into the key concepts that shape this important area of real estate finance. Property valuation is essentially the process of determining the market value of a property. This isn't just a guess. It's a careful estimate based on several key factors. First, we look at the income the property can generate, which helps us understand its earning potential. Then, we compare it to similar properties that have recently sold, giving us a benchmark in the market. We also consider the replacement cost, which is the expense of rebuilding the property from scratch. Finally, the risk factor comes into play. Investors want to be compensated for the risks they take, and this influences the value as well. When valuing income properties, this process is closely tied to appraisals and the broader market for capital, reflecting how much investors are willing to pay based on expected returns. When it comes to property appraisal, there are three main approaches we use to determine value. First is the cost approach, which calculates the property's worth by adding the estimated land value to the cost of replacing the building, then subtracting any depreciation. This approach is grounded in replacement logic, focusing on what would cost to recreate the property today. Next, we have the market approach. This method values a property by looking at similar properties that have recently sold in the same area. It relies heavily on comparable sales, giving us insight into what buyers are actually paying for similar real estate. Finally, the income approach is used primarily for income-generating properties. It values property based on the cash flow it can produce, considering both the net operating income and the capitalization rate that investors expect. This approach connects the property's valuation directly to its potential to generate returns, which is crucial in the market for capital. Together, these three approaches provide a comprehensive framework for appraising different types of properties. Here we have the cost approach, which focuses on determining the value of a property based on its replacement cost. The fundamental formula here is value equals land plus replacement cost new minus depreciation. First, we estimate the land value as if it were vacant, setting a baseline for property's worth. Next, we add the current cost to build an equivalent structure on that land, reflecting what it would take to reproduce the building today. Then, we subtract any depreciation, which includes physical wear and tear, functional obsolescence, and external factors that might reduce value. This approach works best for newer buildings and special-purpose properties where the replacement cost is more predictable and relevant. It's a practical way to appraise property by focusing on tangible costs rather than relying solely on market comparisons or income potential. When we talk about the market approach, specifically comparable sales analysis, it works best when there are enough truly comparable transactions in the market. The core idea here is that the value of a property is derived from what similar properties have recently sold for. The process starts by selecting recent sales of comparable assets. These need to be as similar as possible to the property in question. Next, adjustments are made to account for differences in location, size, condition, and the timing of the sale. These factors can significantly affect value, so making these adjustments is crucial to getting an accurate estimate. Finally, the adjusted data from these comparable sales is used to indicate the value of the property. Essentially, this method anchors pricing to real, observable market behavior, making a reliable way to appraise properties, especially income-generating ones. This approach ties closely to how the market for capital operates in valuing income properties, ensuring that the appraisal reflects current market realities. Now, let's talk about the income approach, specifically the capitalization rate method. This method is grounded in a core valuation relationship, which is that the value of a property equals its net operating income, or NOI, divided by the capitalization rate, or cap rate. Essentially, the cap rate is a rate of return that investors expect, and it's derived from market data. It reflects the risk associated with the property, anticipated growth in income, and the required return on investment. By using this approach, we take the property's expected income and translate it into its market value. This method is especially important when valuing income-producing properties, as it ties the appraisal directly to the market for capital and investor expectations. Net operating income, or NOI, is the foundation of property valuation. It starts with gross rental income, which is the total amount a property generates from rent and any other recurring income sources. From this, we subtract operating expenses, which include all the ongoing costs necessary to manage and maintain the property, like maintenance management fees, taxes, and insurance. The reason NOI is so important is that it gives us a clear picture of the property's income generating ability before considering financing or taxes. Simply put, NOI equals gross rental income minus operating expenses. This core formula is essential for valuing income properties and plays a crucial role in both appraisals and the broader market for capital. The capitalization rate, or cap rate, is a key metric we use to evaluate income properties. It's calculated by dividing the net operating income by the property value. Essentially, it shows the return an investor can expect based on the income generated. Higher cap rates usually indicate higher perceived risk or weaker growth expectations, which often means a property is priced lower to attract buyers. On the other hand, lower cap rates suggest stronger demand, higher quality income, and more expensive assets. Even small changes in the cap rate can have a big impact. A 1-point shift can lead to a significant change in the estimated value of a property. This is why investors pay close attention to cap rates. They provide a direct link between market pricing and stabilized operating income. Ultimately, the cap rate is a core valuation formula that helps investors compare income returns across different properties. It's a critical tool for understanding the appraisal process and the market for capital in real estate. Let's take a closer look at the difference between the discount rate and the cap rate, which are both essential concepts in valuing income properties. First, the discount rate is a forward-looking figure. It represents a required return investors expect to receive, and it's used to discount each future cash flow back to its present value. This rate reflects the risk involved and incorporates interest rates, a risk premium, and uncertainty about growth. Think of it as the total required yield, the central rate used in discounted cash flow models to help determine value based on expected future performance. On the other hand, the cap rate offers a current snapshot of value. It's calculated by dividing the net operating income, or NOI, by the property's market value, typically based on 1 year of stabilized income. The cap rate acts as a market pricing signal, derived from comparable sales and investor expectations. It's commonly used in direct capitalization, converting a single year's income into an estimate of value. So, while the discount rate focuses on investor return and future expectations, the cap rate zeroes in on current income yield. Understanding these differences is crucial in navigating property valuation, as they provide complementary perspectives on risk and return. When investors face uncertainty in cash flows, they naturally demand a higher return to compensate for that risk. Several factors contribute to this increased risk premium, including lease rollovers, periods of vacancy, the property's location, and the use of leverage. Each of these elements makes future income less predictable, so investors expect more return for taking on that uncertainty. This higher required return translates directly into lower property values, because increased risk leads to higher discount rates and cap rates used in valuation. In essence, the core relationship here is straightforward. As risk goes up, the risk premium rises, which pushes the required returns higher, ultimately reducing the property's market value. This dynamic plays a critical role in how income properties are appraised and how capital markets price those risks. When we talk about the capital market context in real estate valuation, it's important to recognize that property values are not determined in isolation. Instead, they fluctuate in response to changes in the broader cost of capital, available investment alternatives, and overall market risk. One of the key drivers here is interest rates, which directly influence the required returns investors expect. When interest rates rise, the required return also increases, putting downward pressure on property values and vice versa. Another critical factor is the flow of capital. When more money chases real estate, capitalization rates tend to compress, meaning prices go up because investors accept lower yields. Conversely, when capital withdraws, cap rates expand, and property values often decline. Real estate doesn't exist in a vacuum. It competes for investment dollars against stocks, bonds, and other asset classes, making its valuation heavily influenced by these alternative opportunities. Ultimately, this means that the valuation of income-producing properties is shaped as much by capital market conditions as by the physical and operational characteristics of the property itself. Understanding this relationship is essential for accurate appraisal and for navigating the market for real estate capital effectively. Now, let's talk about how interest rates influence property valuation. When interest rates go up, the cost of borrowing increases, which means investors need higher returns to justify their investment. This causes property values to decline because the higher rates push the required returns and borrowing costs upward. There's an important inverse relationship here. As benchmark yields rise in the capital markets, real estate investors demand greater returns to compensate for the increased opportunity cost. When discount rates and capitalization rates increase, the present value of the property's income streams falls, leading to lower valuations. Specifically, higher mortgage rates reduce the amount of leverage buyers can use, which limits their purchasing power. Additionally, investors begin to compare property yields against other investments like bonds, which means they require a higher return from real estate to stay competitive. Finally, because the net operating income remains the same, but the cap rate goes up, the price investors are willing to pay for that income drops. So, in summary, rising interest rates directly contribute to a downward adjustment in property values due to their impact on borrowing costs, required returns, and yield comparisons in the capital markets. Here we're looking at the direct capitalization method, which is a straightforward way to value income-producing properties. Essentially, this approach takes 1 year of stabilized net operating income, or NOI, and converts it directly into an estimate of the property's value. The formula you see here is the NOI divided by the market capitalization rate, often called the cap rate. In this example, the stabilized NOI is $500,000, and the market cap rate is 5% or 0.05. When we divide $500,000 by 0.05, we get an estimated value of $10 million. This method provides a quick and effective way to gauge the market value of a property based on its income potential and current market conditions. It's important because it links income generation directly to what investors are willing to pay, reflecting both the property performance and overall market risk. Now, let's talk about discounted cash flow analysis, or DCF, which is a fundamental approach in valuing income-producing properties. The core idea is to project each year's income stream, then discount each of those cash flows back to their present value based on the required rate of return. Importantly, we also include the present value of the resale or terminal value at the end of the holding period. Put simply, the value today equals the sum of those annual cash flows plus the terminal value, all adjusted to reflect today's dollars. This method captures both the timing of cash flows and the associated risks, which is why it's so flexible. It accommodates uneven growth, changes in leasing, and assumptions about the planned sale at the end of the investment horizon. On the slide, you can see this process broken down year by year. Started with a net operating income in the first year, discounted to today's value, then year 2, year 3, and so on until year 5, where we include both the income and the sale value. This comprehensive approach provides a detailed and accurate valuation by considering all future benefits and risks in today's terms. When we talk about market efficiency and property pricing, it's important to recognize that property prices don't adjust quickly. This happens because information about properties tends to be local, costly to obtain, and often imperfect. Unlike more transparent public securities markets, private property deals limit how much price information is available to buyers and sellers. Another key factor is that properties are highly heterogeneous. No two are exactly alike. This makes every sale an imperfect comparison, complicating the pricing process. Additionally, capital doesn't flow as swiftly in real estate markets, so there's typically a delay between changes in market fundamentals and the prices we actually see. All of these factors lead to less efficient markets where mispricing can occur. This inefficiency increases the need for thorough and careful property appraisals. Ultimately, property pricing is shaped by the quality of information available, market liquidity, and the speed at which transactions can be completed. Understanding these dynamics is crucial when valuing income properties and navigating the market for capital. On this slide, We focus on the core appraisal standards and professional practices that ensure reliable and credible valuation. First, compliance with the SPAP, which stands for the Uniform Standard Professional Appraisal Practice, is essential. This means every assignment must adhere to established ethics, proper reporting, and clearly defined scope of work rules. Next, independence is critical. Appraisers must provide unbiased value opinions that are fully supportable and free from any client pressure. Market evidence plays a central role as well. Conclusions must be based on thoroughly verified data, relevant comparable properties, and transparent adjustments that reflect real market conditions. Lastly, professional judgment is key. While the methods used are important, the credibility of an appraisal largely depends on the appraiser's experience, the quality of documentation, and defensible reasoning throughout the process. In summary, reliable appraisals are consistent, independent, and firmly grounded in evidence. Ethics protect the objectivity of the appraisal. Standards ensure comparability across assignments, and proper documentation makes the conclusions defensible in any review or challenge. On this slide, we're looking at the difference between market value and appraised value, two key concepts in real estate valuation. Market value is essentially what a typical buyer is willing to pay right now based on current market conditions. It's influenced by factors like buyer demand, availability of financing, and competition among buyers. This value can change quickly because it's tied to things like interest rates, market sentiment, and timing, and it's reflected in actual sales transactions on the open market. On the other hand, appraised value is the appraiser professional opinion, which relies on analyzing comparable sales, income potential, and the cost to replace the property. This appraisal follows established standards and assumptions and is anchored to a specific valuation date. Because it's an estimate based on data and judgment, the appraised value might not always match the market price, especially when market conditions are rapidly changing. To sum up, market value is observed directly in the market and can shift quickly, while appraised value is estimated through analysis, anchored by standard methods and assumptions, and may differ from market price when there's volatility. Understanding both values is crucial when valuing income properties and navigating capital markets. Here we have a case study focused on an income property, specifically a class of suburban office building that is currently 92% leased. The key financial figure to note here is the annual net operating income, or NOI, which stands at $1.5 million. To determine the value of this property, we use the market capitalization rate, which is given as 7.5%. By dividing the NOI by the cap rate, we arrive at an indicated value for property of $20 million. This example highlights the direct capitalization approach to valuing stabilized office assets, emphasizing how appraisals and market conditions for capital come together to establish property value. When we talk about mortgage debt and equity valuation, it's important to understand how the total property value is divided. Essentially, the value of the property is split between lenders who hold the mortgage debt and the owners who hold the equity. The debt has a fixed claim on the property's cash flow, meaning lenders get paid first, and their return is usually a fixed amount. On the other hand, equity represents the residual value, or what's left over after mortgage payments are made. As the amount of debt increases, the value of equity becomes more sensitive to fluctuations in income and changes in the market price. This means that higher leverage can amplify both gains and losses for property owner. To put it simply, you calculate the property value by adding the mortgage debt to the equity value. Equity is what remains after subtracting the outstanding loan balance from the property's market value. Understanding this breakdown is core to valuing income-producing properties, as it highlights how the capital markets impact both risk and return. Here we see the cap rate trends in today's market across different property types, comparing data from 2021 to projections for 2024 to 2025. Cap rates have generally risen across the board, indicating a shift in investor expectations. For instance, multifamily properties have seen an increase from 4.8% to 5.8%, while industrial properties went from 4.6% to 5.6%. Retail cap rates have moved from 5.4% to 6.3%, offices from 5.9% to 7.2%, and hotels from 5.6% to 6.7%. This rise, averaging around 104 basis points, signals that higher financing costs and stricter return requirements are pressuring property values downward unless net operating income growth can offset this cap rate expansion. The office sector shows the most significant repricing due to the additional risks investors perceive in leasing and refinancing. However, multifamily and industrial properties demonstrate relative strength, maintaining the lowest cap rates thanks to more resilient rents and better liquidity. Importantly, as cap rates go up, property valuations generally decline unless income growth can keep pace. This balance between cap rates and income growth is crucial for understanding the current appraisal and investment environment in income properties. Now, let's take a closer look at the key components of an appraisal report. First, we have property identification. This section includes a legal description, ownership details, and specifies the real property rights that are being appraised. It sets the foundation for understanding exactly what is being valued. Next is the scope of work. Here, we define the intended use of the appraisal, the valuation date, the methods applied, and any limiting assumptions. This clarifies the boundaries and context for the appraisal. Then, there's the market and site analysis. This part covers the location, zoning, neighborhood trends, demand drivers, and the physical characteristics of the property. These factors heavily influence value by providing insight into the environment surrounding the property. Following that, we review the income and expense analysis. This section includes the rent roll, operating costs, net operating income, and the assumptions behind cash flow inputs. It's crucial for income-producing properties where cash flow drives value. Next, comparable evidence is presented. This involves sales, leases, and market adjustments that support the valuation benchmarks. It's where the appraiser ties real-world data to the valuation conclusions. Finally, the reconciliation and final value section weighs the different valuation approaches, explains the reasoning, and arrives at the concluded opinion of value. A strong appraisal report is transparent, well documented, and fully supportable. It moves from raw data through thorough analysis to a solid conclusion. Ultimately, this report is where appraisal judgment is turned into a defendable market value opinion. When we talk about what makes a reliable appraisal, there are three key elements to consider. First is market analysis. A trustworthy appraisal uses current comparables, lease evidence, and cap rate data from the same market to ensure the value reflects real-time conditions. Next, professional standards are crucial. This means applying consistent methods, making clear assumptions, and supporting every conclusion with proper documentation. Finally, local knowledge plays a big role. Understanding neighborhood conditions, tenant demand, zoning limits, and specific risks tied to property helps provide more accurate valuation. In essence, a reliable appraisal is a combination of solid evidence plus informed judgment. When it comes to valuing income properties, there are several common challenges and pitfalls that can significantly impact the accuracy of the appraisal. First, using bad comparables is a major issue. If the sales you compare differ in location, lease structure, age, or quality, they can distort the value rather than provide a reliable anchor. Next, misstated net operating income is another frequent problem. Ignoring factors like vacancy rates, reserves, or recurring operating costs makes the income appear stronger than it actually is, leading to overly optimistic valuations. Choosing the wrong capitalization rate is also critical. Applying a cap rate that doesn't align with the asset's risk profile, growth potential, or current market conditions can quickly skew the valuation, resulting in either undervaluation or overvaluation. Additionally, relying on stale assumptions can make an appraisal outdated from the start. Using old rent levels, outdated expense ratios, or lagging views on interest rates can lead to inaccuracies that undermine the report's credibility. It's important to remember that even small errors in these inputs can cause large pricing discrepancies. Ultimately, a credible valuation is only as solid as the assumptions behind it. Keeping these pitfalls in mind helps ensure a more reliable and insightful appraisal. When we look at environmental and legal factors in property valuation, it's important to understand how these elements can impact a property's value. Environmental issues like contamination, flood risk, deferred remediation, or energy compliance can significantly increase costs. These challenges reduce income stability and often require higher returns to justify the investment, which drives down the property's market value. On the legal side, Things like zoning restrictions, lease disputes, title defects, easements, and code violations can limit how you use the property. These constraints can also make the property less attractive to potential buyers, further lowering its marketability and value. In essence, any factor that introduces uncertainty, additional costs, or use restrictions tends to push the property's value down. That's why due diligence is critical. It changes pricing by helping appraisers assess the risks accurately. Appraisers incorporate these risks into their valuation by adjusting expected cash flow, the required capitalization rate, or even the highest and best use of the property. Understanding these adjustments is key when valuing income properties because they directly influence how both appraisers and the market respond to risks and opportunities. Let's look at how changes in interest rates impact the valuation of income properties through scenario analysis. First, when rates are rising, we generally see cap rates expand, which means they go up. This typically leads to a decline in property values because higher required returns push prices down. Next, in a stable rate environment, cap rates tend to hold steady within a certain range. Here, property values are driven more by factors like income growth and perceived risk, rather than interest rate movements. This creates a more predictable pricing environment. Finally, when rates are falling, cap rates usually compress or decrease. This results in an increase in property values, as lower discount rates reduce the pressure on prices and make assets more attractive to investors. So, understanding these scenarios helps us anticipate how interest rate shifts influence the market and property valuation. Let's review the key takeaways for valuing income properties. First, value begins with the income, particularly focusing on stable and supportable net operating income, or NOI. This is a foundation because consistent income signals the property's ability to generate returns. Second, capitalization rates, or cap rates, serve as a vital link between risk, growth prospects, and expected return, which together determine market value. Third, an accurate appraisal is most reliable when the cost, market, and income approaches to valuation are in agreement, providing a balanced view. Finally, property pricing is heavily influenced by the broader capital markets. Interest rates, availability of debt, and what investors expect for returns all play crucial roles in how properties are valued. Understanding these four ideas gives a comprehensive framework for assessing income property values. To effectively apply valuation to your portfolio, start by selecting one property and applying the valuation framework consistently. This disciplined approach ensures accuracy and familiarity with the process. First, build your baseline by calculating the net operating income, estimating capitalization rates, and benchmarking each asset against recent market data. Next, stress test your assumptions by modeling potential changes in rents, vacancy rates, expenses, and interest rates to understand how these variables might impact your valuation. Finally, turn your analysis into actionable decisions, whether that means prioritizing acquisitions, refinancing, holding, or repositioning assets. This process helps you make informed choices that align with market realities and your investment goals.